Hi, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I bring you the scariest, true, paranormal stories that I've ever come by. Please enjoy these true, creepy, paranormal stories.
Scary, true, paranormal story number 1, The Witch Neighbor.
About 20 years ago, in 2006, in Rosenberg, Texas, I lived in an apartment with my wife. I was about 21 years old at the time. We lived on the second floor with a balcony patio that we shared with our neighbor. Our neighbor came from New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina. When our neighbor moved in, many paranormal occurrences began happening. It had only been a couple of days after our neighbor moved in that I would hear random knocking on the walls. On a couple of occasions, I would wake up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water. When I entered the kitchen, I would suddenly feel as if somebody was standing in the pitch black in the living room, just staring at me. One time, the kitchen lights started flickering. I brushed it off as an electric issue. Another night, when we were getting ready to go to bed, my wife saw me in the bathroom standing in front of the mirror. She began having a full conversation with me. The scary thing was, it wasn't me. I was outside making sure the car was locked. When she saw the real me walking into the apartment, she began to cry. She looked petrified. I asked her what happened, and that's when she told me she was talking to me moments earlier, that I was having a full conversation with her. She said we were talking about our plans for tomorrow. I knew then that our apartment was no doubt haunted, and it had something to do with our new neighbor. Many times, things would randomly go missing. Car keys, wallets, and other important small items would be placed in other parts of the apartment. I only saw my neighbor one time. She was a black older lady, and she had a huge black hat on her head. We both were opening our doors to get into our apartments. When she opened her door, I looked in and saw candles that were on the floor fully lit. After she walked in, she began screaming. I then heard another voice talking back to her. It was the creepiest thing I had ever heard. At that exact moment, I remember feeling extremely scared and feeling like I was being watched. I quickly went inside, wondering, who is this woman? Even our pet parakeet bird that we had at the time went through hell. She started to grow warts on her beak. I felt bad for her. She was young and healthy, but I noticed as soon as our neighbor moved in right next door to us, her health started declining rapidly. I was not going to allow my pet bird to die like that. One day, I opened the balcony doors and reached out with my pet bird on my hand, trying to tell her to go ahead and fly away. She turned her head back and looked at me for a few seconds. I know she was trying to tell me thank you for letting her go free. Even though animals can't really talk, I do believe they know a lot more than we think. She then flew off into the sunlight. But everything boiled over one night at about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was awoken by a sharp, excruciating pain in my back. It felt as if I was being squeezed, and my muscles were restless all up and down my back. I couldn't keep still. I jumped off the bed and began pacing back and forth from one end of the room to the other. I told my wife that something was wrong with my back and that I couldn't take the pain. The whole time she was telling me to calm down and to lay down. The pain was too great for me to lay down. The bedroom lights were still completely off, and it was pitch dark in the room except for a little moonlight coming through our balcony window. As I was pacing back and forth, what I then saw next shocked me to the core. I will never forget it. It was a person's shadow seeping through the balcony window. I froze still. Then I slowly crept up to the window blinds on the door and put them down to see who it was. There stood my witch neighbor, with her nose practically touching the outside to my bedroom wall. Her head was down, and her arms were spread apart in the air, palms upright. She was praying or chanting something. Her eyes were closed. I quickly told my wife to quietly witness what I was seeing. She saw the woman also. I quickly called the police to try and get her in trouble. I did not want to even talk to such a scary person. I was disgusted with what she was doing. I was also very pissed off because I knew she was causing all my pain. As soon as I saw a huge flashlight light up our balcony, going from left to right, I knew the police were out there. I looked at the witch, and she was still on the balcony wearing a white sleeping gown. She was looking down, staring right at the cop as he flashed the light towards her. She was hiding in the corner, but there was no way the cop didn't see her. For some reason, he then left. I was extremely upset and baffled as to how the witch didn't get caught. I knew it was because she was into the occult, and that's what probably helped her. At that point, the pain in my back completely vanished. I was still in disbelief as to what just occurred. Not even 2 weeks after that incident, thankfully she moved out. The moral to this true story is, be careful who you live next to. It just might be a witch.
Scary, true, paranormal story number 2, The Growl.
What I'm about to tell you is 100% true, and there is no reasonable explanation for what occurred that dark night of October the 11th of 2021. To begin with, I'm a huge fan of the paranormal and love telling true paranormal ghost stories to my kids. This particular night, me and my oldest daughter Chelsea were home alone. It was around 2 in the morning, and we were both bored with not much to do. Since Halloween was around the corner, I brought up the idea to tell true ghost stories in the dark. I could tell that she was already getting bored with the countless ghost stories I've told throughout the years. I promised her this was a new story she had never heard before. She reluctantly agreed after some convincing. We went into my bedroom and closed the door. I then turned off the lights and even the fan so it was extremely quiet. I laid on my bed, which was across the room from the door. My daughter sat on the floor at the foot of my bed. I decided to tell her a story she never heard before that even petrified me. I then began to tell her the story. It was a story about a man that was in the hospital. He had just finished having surgery on his heart. While he was asleep, he dreamed of a little girl that gave him a teddy bear. She then spoke to him, telling him as long as he keeps the bear she gave him, he will never get sick again. He then woke up in a hospital bed. When he looked around the room, he noticed there was a small teddy bear next to him on the bed. His wife, who was sitting in a chair beside him, told him, "While you were sleeping, a little girl entered the room. The little girl wanted to give you this small stuffed teddy bear. She then turned around and walked out of the room." Her husband couldn't believe what he was witnessing. The bear was the same exact teddy bear that was given to him in his dream. He then asked his wife what the little girl looked like. As she began to explain details about the young girl, he started to feel nauseous and chills went through his feet to his head. It was the same girl he dreamt of. At this part of the story, my daughter jumped on the bed and laid right next to me. I asked her, "Was everything okay?" She claimed she felt as if she was being watched, as if somebody was in the room with us. I smiled and figured she was definitely getting spooked by the story. I then tried to figure out how the rest of the story went from that point on. There was a brief silence in the room, but it was during this silence that something occurred that me nor my daughter would ever forget to this very day, and it still haunts me every time I think about it. In the midst of the silence, by the foot of the bed, we heard a kid's voice. It said "Growl," as if trying to scare us. My daughter screamed the loudest death scream I had ever heard. I tried to keep my composure, thinking who else could be in the room with us, and what kid would be crawling around the floor in the pitch black. No one else was home other than me and my daughter. That's when I felt the blanket underneath me get pulled. Something climbed on the foot of the bed, making an indentation. We both felt the bed go down by our feet, and we both screamed. I pulled my legs up to my chest and scooted over to my daughter's side of the bed, screaming and hoping whatever it was wouldn't continue to crawl toward us. At this point, my daughter was crying her eyes out, and I myself was almost at that point. Not being able to see what it was only intensified the terror we both felt. Just then, as if sent by an angel, my wife and other daughter opened the door to my bedroom, and light filled up the room. My daughter jumped over me and ran out of the room, and my wife asked me what happened. I got up and walked around the bed, looking under it, trying to find someone hiding or some explanation to what just occurred moments before. I explained to my wife what we were doing and what happened. Sad to say, but since that night, I have never told my daughter any more scary paranormal ghost stories. I spoke to some people who have knowledge of the paranormal, and what they told me gave me the creeps. They said telling true stories about hauntings, demons, ghosts, or anything of the paranormal nature invites and brings in entities, whether you invite them or not. Be careful when telling scary ghost stories. Even listening to them can invite them in. There could be one staring right at you this very moment.
Scary, true, paranormal story number 3. The Tallman bunk beds.
In Wisconsin, in early February of 1987, Alan and Debbie Tallman purchased bunk beds at a secondhand thrift store. They stored them in their basement. 3 months later, in May of 1987, they moved the bunk beds upstairs to their kids' room. This marked 9 months of paranormal and terrifying experiences for the family that has ever been recorded. Strange occurrences began to happen nightly. The first night, the bunk beds were upstairs. Their oldest son went into his parents' room claiming that his radio clock was playing music by itself and turning different stations on its own. His dad got upset, thinking that his son was being immature, and took the radio away from his son, warning him to behave. Another night, as their kids were asleep, they were awoken by something or someone crawling on the ground, portraying a dog, and growling and barking at them. Even though it was dark in the room, they could still see the outline of a dark shadow crawling in and out from underneath their bunk beds. Also, their daughter would explain that there was a fire in the room. When Alvin and Debbie went to investigate, they found nothing. One quiet night, Alan and Debbie heard their daughter screaming. They went to go see what was wrong. The daughter claimed there was a witch with red eyes standing behind the door. Later that week, Alan Tallman came home from working night shift around 2 o'clock in the morning, and after pulling in the driveway and getting out of his car, he began to hear a howling in the wind. The wind began to pick up, and the howling got louder and louder. Then he heard a voice say, "Come here," from around the side of the house. That's when he walked around to the side of the house, but nothing was there. When he came back around the corner to the front of the garage, to his shock, the garage was on fire, with flames reaching past the rooftop. He quickly went into the house to retrieve a fire extinguisher, and when he came back outside, to his shock, there was no fire, nor any indication of one. He walked inside his house and closed the front door, in disbelief, but as he reached down to pick up his lunch kit, it was thrown across the living room by an unknown entity. There was a night when Mr. Tallman had to go to work and begged his brother Todd to stay the night with his family to protect them from whatever was haunting their house. So, his brother Todd spent the night at his house. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, while Todd was asleep on the floor of the kid's bedroom, he was awoken by a noise he said was coming from the closet. Fog began to slowly appear out of nowhere. He then sat up and stared at the closet door as it began to slowly open. What happened next will forever be a secret that no one knows. A bright light filled the room, and Todd witnessed something truly terrifying. He screamed and sat up petrified with no emotion on his face. To this very day, Todd has never said exactly what he saw that night. Debbie entered the room and began to grab her children. She screamed at Todd to snap out of it and to get up. She asked Todd what did he see, but he did not answer her. He slowly got up and walked out of the room like a zombie with no facial expressions. After a couple of minutes, he finally snapped out of it and began to help Debbie get the rest of the kids out of the house. They left the house that night, and that following weekend, the Tallmans had the bunk beds crushed by a bulldozer, and not long after, they moved out of their house hoping that the ghost or entity would never ever follow them wherever they went.